Again, thank everyone for joining us today for another Wildlife Wednesday with the Center for Wildlife Studies. My name is Jeff Stetz. I'm the Director of Science and an Assistant Professor here at the Center. And as I say every month, every chance we have to give one of these talks, one of the highlights of my job and the highlight of every month is getting to help share some of the work that our collaborators and instructors and partners are involved with, talk about their teaching and their conservation. Sorry, I'll be letting folks in on the side here if I appear distracted for a moment. We see this as a great opportunity to help share the work of some amazing folks involved with the center and beyond, trying to share their lessons from conservation education and how we're trying to make a difference. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Dulce Espelosin is a professional facilitator and conservation practitioner with more than 16 years of experience advancing community-based conservation across more than 15 countries. Trained in communication, human behavior, and social marketing, her work focuses on helping organizations and communities design practical strategies that lead to lasting conservation impact. Dulce began her career in Mexico's La Primavera protected area and later spent 12 years with RARE, where she led behavior change initiatives and training programs in diverse and often remote settings worldwide. In 2020, she received the Distinguished Service Award from the Society for Conservation Biology for her leadership in conservation outreach. Currently, Dulce supports conservation leadership and behavior change strategies worldwide through her consulting work and collaborations, including USAID, Flora and Fauna International, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. So we are obviously very excited here at CWS that she's joined us to teach a class in behavior change for sustainable impact. And of course, for joining us today to talk about her work. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Dulce.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everybody, for being here and being on time. And I'm so glad to see so many different names, but some are super Latin to me. So, hola to those that speak Spanish. ¿Cómo están? Gracias por estar aquí. I'm very happy to have you all in here today. And like Jeff was saying, this is part of the Wednesdays that we do free in the Center for Wildlife Studies. This is part of one of the two webinars that we're going to be having. The next one, it's on April 8th, and it's going to be about engaging communities to create real conservation impact. So it's going to be a follow-up of this one about influencing behaviors without losing focus. So hopefully you can join both to have the full picture. And of course, as you do that, and if you have more interest in learning more and really understanding tools and techniques to get in, deep dive into behavior change, hopefully you can register for our course that it's available. And it's called Behavior Change for Sustainable Impact. I know that Jeff is gonna start sharing a little bit of the links to join that at some moment. So if you are interested in that, please do. I also want to say that I have, this is my website, Espelosin, and it's in Spanish, as you can see, but we also have the English version in there in the website. So in any case that you need anything related consultancies for behavior change, marketing, etc., you can reach out in there. Okay, so with that, I just want to say welcome, everybody. And again, thank you for being here. And well, just to start and make sure that we are all aligned and, thinking the same ideas and knowing where we are going to start, I would like to see if you can start by sharing in the chat what comes to mind, the first things that you think about when you hear or when you heard in the past and register for this session about influencing behaviors without losing focus. What do you think it entails? What do you think it's about? Anything that you believe it's important to share in here, please just say it in the chat. It's always nice to hear what everybody is thinking and imagine that this course is going to be about and see if we are somehow aligned or in the same page. It can be words, just like whatever you think. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to read some of those. Navigating around false information or making someone excited about a topic. Yeah, that's very important. The messages, the desire change. Yes, that's really true. trying to adapt communities' needs and values while also focusing on conservation goals. Yeah, that's very accurate. Nice. Thank you. Yeah, and as you can see, many of these, of course, are some of the ideas that everybody has in mind when we talk about behavior change. And I want to start sharing a little bit of what this entails. And without further introductions, I just want to say that today, hopefully, we can have the very basics. Let's say, or imagine this is your one-on-one on behavior change. Some of you might be more advanced, but I just want to make sure that everybody is in the same level after the end of this session, where we need to understand that the purpose of influencing behavior without losing focus, it has some very specific elements. And for example, the first one, it's understanding the current behavior, what is happening right now with the community or with the people that I want to work with. Identifying what people are actually doing today without doing assumptions and recognizing the real drivers behind that behavior. It's super important when we are thinking about every strategy or any strategy about behavior change or community engagement. And I'm going to be talking more about that. Also, it's important that we know that a second important step is to have a good definition of what the desired behavior is. Because, in other words, we understand what is the current behavior, but we also need to understand and have a very, very clear sense of what is what we desire to change and what is going to be the ask or the clear ask that we want to do to that community, to that people. And for that, of course, the third step, as you can imagine, is identifying the right target audience. Because sometimes we tend to think about in all the city as the place that we want to focus or the audience that we need to reach. And sometimes if we start segmenting those audiences, it's easier to work and it's easier to have a real focus and make some real impact. So I'm going to cover these three topics today, and hopefully at the end of the session, you can feel better about it. And well, if we talk about, how do we think and act as human, we need to talk about behavior. Specifically because behavior change, if you think about it, is when we, the humans, take decisions. And we do decisions every day, like small or big decisions. We all make hundreds of decisions every day. And it can go from very simple to very complex decisions. Some of these decisions are almost automatic. For example, like choosing what to eat that day or what route to take to work. But others require more thinking, more analysis, and sometimes even social consultation, like deciding, for example, if I want to change my job or buy a bicycle or start a new business. That requires more thinking, more analytical skills to really make good decisions. But the question is that we need to explore if we are really, really taking action. The thing is that if we just think about it or we go and move into the next step, that is really, really something that is happening. So for example, some everyday behaviors, as you can see in here, is going for a walk, and that's super easy. We tend to do that, just whenever we feel like. But sometimes, if you also think about it, sometimes we don't go for the walking. We just stay and keep working or keep cooking or keep doing whatever we're doing. And something is stopping us from going to that walk. So if you see the, let's say, polarities of the decision, it has something to be with barriers, motivations, and how, I will say, willing I am into do something. We do other type of decisions like drinking more water, sleeping earlier, waking up earlier, but we also did, like I was saying, more complex decisions. And for example, let's talk about changing jobs. For example, if I want to change a job, of course, I will have to make a decision of leaving my current job, or maybe a decision of why the other job is better than the one that I have actually. For that, I will require a set of different analytical things and analytical ideas to really, really make a decision that it's, a good balance between my life and my professional and personal balance that I need to have. So as you see, all of these are decisions that we need to really think. And when we say it, it's easy. It seems like it's something that it's very doable to change a behavior. But when you think about conservation and you ask somebody that is working in the field or somebody that is doing, for example, activities in the ocean like fishing, and you say, there's a problem in the ocean, we have some, some type of reduction in this species, so we need to do a type of, change in the way that you fish. But if we ask this just like that because we see the rationale behind, but we don't take in consideration what that people is really thinking, feeling, fearing, and all of the barriers that that people must have, that fisherman or that fisher must have. Because if you think in this person might be feeding a family, might be eating that day, that fish that they are, fishing that day. And if we just go and say, you need to change gear, you need to take care of the seasonality of the fishing, et cetera, maybe they will receive the information, maybe won't, but that from changing the behavior, it's very, very, very different. So whenever we send messages and we give information, it doesn't equal that they will change the behavior. So we need to have more strategies for that. And we need to make sure that we plan ahead on how to provide those solutions that the people will have in order to really make a decision. So all of this, again, is because we need to think about the human behaviors. Oh, sorry, there's something here. Oh, the human behavior and why this is influenced and by what. And for example, all day we need to think about all the habits and routines that the people is doing, the social pressures, because for example, getting back into this example of the fisher, sometimes the fisher communities are very they tend to be neighbors, family, friends. And when one person change the practice that they normally do because they learned that from their father and the grandfather, sometimes the social pressure can be very, very overwhelming. Sometimes they can feel the pressure as a negative thing, and they might come back to the current behavior or the past behavior. So it's important that we think a little bit also in the different spheres that the people is having and the messages that they are receiving from the people that they trust and the people that they live with. So meaning, the circle of influences that they have around them. So all of these, some of the things that we need to consider and make sure that we enter into this, let's say, community and the work that we are planning to do, taking in consideration all of these, the social pressure, the expectation that these people will have, the emotional factors as well. Because also when we are thinking, for example, again, with the fishers, and they want to, for example, live the way that they normally fish, that might have some emotional also pressure and weight, because sometimes they might be losing some money, and that must have an impact that is negative with their family, with their friends, and emotionally they could feel different and vulnerable. So it's important that we also take that in consideration and make sure that they can feel, in the other hand, more motivated. And for that is that we will be also, thinking how to engage the communities properly so they can really, really feel that the motivation is positive, and the social pressure is also motivating, meaning that the people that is surrounding them might be kind of in favor of the new behavior instead of, acting against that behavior. So we need to just start thinking about all of those factors and also about the immediate and long-term reward. So that means that if we are asking them to reduce the way, well, not the way, but the amount of fish per day, for example, what is the regard, or what is the solution or the alternative, the income that we are providing as an alternative economical incentive? So for example, maybe we say you're going to become a tourist guide instead, because you know where the pretty, the prettiest or most attractive marine biodiversity is. So you can, have tourism coming and seeing this type of species in the ocean, and you know where to find them, and you could charge for that. So if that's something that the fishers, the target audience, are interested in, that might be an alternative that we can, explore with them and build upon a new way for them to do income. So we need to think about in all of these different factors to make sure that they really feel the positive influence, but not the negative influence. So that's something that I just want to leave you thinking and kind of processing. And something that I want to share is that if you have questions, comments, you can start please writing those in the chat. At the end, we're going to have a space for reading those, all of those. Okay, so then we have to start thinking also about these decisions that I was talking that we do every day. And for example, when we reflect and decide about these behaviors, the challenge is aligning with the action. Like I was saying, I think about it, but if I don't really do something, nothing is going to change. So that's why talking about behavior change seems simple, but in reality, it's a complex process that requires this understanding, motivation, and often support from others, the people that is surrounding the target audience. So yes, changing a behavior is difficult, but it's also possible. So that's the good news. And with the right methodology and the proper planning, we can gradually work towards changing even the most difficult behaviors. It will take time, yes. It will take a lot of effort, yes, but it's possible. If we really understand the audience, their motivations, their barriers, and we have all the factors that I mentioned plus others in consideration, it's going to be possible. So that's the good news. And just because I want to share a little bit of how this works in terms of conservation with a little more of examples, I create this case study that it's based in a real case scenario, but it has some elements to make it more attractive for the learning. This case study is about the human-elephant conflict that it's happening in Central Africa, where, for example, in the Congo Basin, some communities live next to some of the most biodiverse forests in the world. These forests are home of extraordinary wildlife, including forest elephants, gorillas, golden monkeys, chimpanzees, and many other species. Because of this rich biodiversity, the region attracts tourism from all over the world who travel long distances to experience these animals in their natural habitat. And for conservation organizations and governments, the wildlife represents an invaluable ecological and economic asset. So tourism can bring income, jobs, and international recognition to the region. However, for many local communities living near these forests, the situation looks very different because they have a big problem. The local farmers depend on small plots of land to grow crops such as cassava, maize, bananas, and other type of crops that sustain their families and provide income. And the forest elephants frequently leave protected areas and enter these agricultural fields and crops in search of food. And when elephants enter these plots, they can destroy an entire season harvest in a single night. So considering the massive size of strength of elephants, farmers often feel powerless to stop them. So approaching or trying to scare them away, the elephant can also be extremely dangerous. So for many families, the crop destruction means loss of food for their household, loss of income, and increased vulnerability and insecurity. So over time, fear, frustration, and economic hardship grow within the community. The current situation is that because these farmers feel that they have few options to protect their crops, they most immediate react when the elephants appear, and is often to try to kill them. So from the perspective of the farmers, the response seems logical because, of course, that can remove immediately the threat. It also protects the crops and the livelihoods that they have and depend in, reduces the fear for the family and the community. But however, this behavior contributes to decline in the elephant populations of Central Africa. So this situation has become a cycle where elephants destroy crops, farmers, have some type of retaliation about it, the elephant populations decline, and the tension between the conservation efforts and communities increase. So at the same time, the communities feel that the benefits of wildlife tourism rarely reach them directly. So with all of that, there's a big problem. And this problem, it has different causes that I just mentioned, plus others. But of course, it's important that we stop when we are thinking about building behavior change strategies. And we really, really see the problem, not just from the conservation side, but also with the people side. And in this case, as you can see, we have the farmers that are, afraid of the elephants from eating their crops, but also about their life and their health. And all of that has different considerations that we need to make. So what do you think is the real problem here? And what is the analysis here? What do you think is happening? And what do you think is causing that? And you can, for example, share something in the chat if you want about what are some of the causes that are causing this problem if you can. I'm going to give you a minute to just thinking something. Yes, we have lack of habitat, good food for the elephants to stay in the forest. Yeah, that can be. We also think about human-wildlife conflict. Yes, exactly. And if you think about that, and thank you for sharing those, that's what we tend to really, really, have as our default thinking every time that we think in conservation. And we, as a majority of the conservation practitioners, tend to think about that. But that's when we really need to start thinking about the people. And with that, we need to make sure that we know that sometimes this problem can be a behavior change analysis. So every time that you have a problem that is caused by the people, just try to do this behavior change analysis. And think, for example, in this case, for example, frequent crop destruction is caused by the elephant lead farmers to kill these elephants in order to protect their livelihoods and safety. So that's something that, it's a concern for the farmers. It's something that they need to act and have solutions for that. And if you also imagine this scenario, if that doesn't change, nothing is going to change in terms of this conflict. So that's something that it's important when thinking and designing behavior change strategies. And for example, in here, when elephants enter in these farmlands or crops, there could be some ways to really, kind of stop the crop damage and prevent future visits. And this behavior is driven by the fear of the personal safety, the immediate economic loss, the lack of effective alternatives, and the frustration for the damage. So all of that is the current behavior. And as you can see, but I'm going to just come back in a minute, the desired behavior, it's going to be kind of a mirror or what is happening right now. So if we have in here, in the current behavior, fear for personal safety, you can see in here that it might be that we need to feel safer in the coexistence between people and the elephants. We also need to think about, for example, immediate economic loss. And if you think about what we desire, will be, for example, a long-term benefit from tourism and conservation or other income alternatives that we might think. And then lack of effective alternatives. Well, that's kind of the same one of tourism from tourism or benefits from tourism or others. And lastly, frustration with repeated damage. So that's something that has been happening for years. So we need to just make sure that that's reduced, this crop damage. So every time that you have a problem, it's important that you can see the current behavior and kind of mirror into the desired behavior. That's going to be your first, I will say, clue in how to do this and start understanding what you are heading of your strategy and what is the alignment and direction that you need to follow. So that's my first tip. Try to mirror every time that you do this. Current behavior versus desired behavior. And of course, we have to think about, what we'll say to the farmers, what are we going to ask them to do differently, and if this is possible or realistic to ask, if something that they will do and have the ability to do, if they need resources, if they need some type of, trainings or tools or something that is different from what they have already. So in other words, we need to be providing the solutions, because if we don't provide those type of solutions or support, might be even harder for the target audience to adopt the desired behavior. So every time that we think in what are we going to ask them and what is what we want them to do, is also a good moment to ask ourselves, how are we going to support that change? how are we going to make sure that the people that is receiving the ask of what to do differently is receiving the right support to do that. So if we need to provide, let's say, an alternative in economical income, what are those type of, incentives that they need in order to attend different trainings or register as a whatever tourism guides, whatever we are asking them to do and learn, we need to make sure that they get the preparation to receive every formation or tools that they need. So the target audience is the last portion of this, and the, let's say, kind of the third point of the importance of these three basic elements of behavior change. And this is very important because if you think about it, when we talk about the vaccine, this vaccine in the Congo, and that we are thinking in Central Africa, we could start thinking about all Central Africa, and that will be a big amount of people. But if you really, really focus in the target audience and the people that it's needed to be, addressed with this, might be a small community, but also might be a difference between, for example, adults and kids that lives in that community. And when we think about kids, and this is something very important, and I hope that you can take a note on that, when we ask an audience to change a behavior, we cannot ask or include kids in that because kids doesn't have the ability to change a behavior that is related to a income or a type of livelihood of a community, because kids just receive what their parents are providing. So we always need to think about adults as the ones that will make the decision or the behavior change. And kids will play an important role, yes, but as messengers, influencers, but not the people that do the change in behavior. So when you think about the target audience, then in this specific case, for example, you can think about the smallholder farmers living near the forest edges and the wildlife corridors, for example, in a X or Y specific community. And we also could start segmenting even further this audience. So for example, if you know that, for example, the decisions about the crops in that specific community is made by women, then it's women, adult women. If they have a certain age also, that means that perhaps 18 years old will be the minimum, and then until, I don't know, 60 or something like that, level of education. And this is important because you will see in the next webinar, when we talk about how to engage communities, it's important that we know if our target audience, for example, is fluid in reading, and if they do, what is the local language that they have. So we take in consideration all of those elements when we are sending messages to them. Of course, we need to think about the occupation or livelihood in case that they have different livelihoods, cultural background to be respectful of that, economic situation, and access to resources or services. With all of this I will say, in knowledge before starting a behavior change strategy, it's going to be easier that we really focus on the impact that we want to create and have with this specific target audience and with the specific behaviors that we want to ask them, meaning the desired behaviors. So as you can see, if we have a good understanding on what is happening, what is the situation and the problem, what is the current behaviors that they are having, this very specific target audience, then it's going to be easier that I have the mirror desired behaviors. And with that, I can know how to reach and focus with this specific target audience. So I will say that those are the three biggest elements that we need to consider. And of course, this is going to be key, as like I said, for many reasons, but I'm going to make a stop in here just to see if you have any other thoughts about why it's super important to have the right audience segmentation at this stage. So what do you think? You can write in the chat, or you can even share a little bit if you want in the microphone. Great. Yes, to tailor your message for the greatest impact. Exactly. To design the appropriate messaging. Very good. And it's more effective to target the right audience, and they are the ones enacting the behavior the most. Exactly. Yes. So you see, it's going to help us to be very, very specific and focused with the right message in the right audience in the right moment and through the right channels. And we're going to talk about that in the next webinar because it's really, really important. So yes, also, it's important that you start thinking about some potential solutions. But I want to say something very important in here. Once you have the current behavior, the current situation, the problem really well analyzed, and you have the desired behaviors, once you have that and you have the target audience, of course, you're going to start thinking about the potential solutions. But in here is really important and a key element that you include the target audience in the decision making, because they are the ones that can tell you if those, for example, protection methods that you have in mind, like, for example, having a beehive fence or chili-based deterrents or fences, or the early warning systems for elephant movements, or the night watch groups within communities. For all of those, they might have another type of different methods that they would like to learn, or that they are seeing that other communities that are neighbors from them is working properly or are working properly, and they might have other ways to do it that it's better for that community. And try to think that whatever you think is the best for them, they need to agree and they need to be, of course, in alignment with you to make sure that that solution or method is really adopted and not discard. Because what happens when we think and go and add solutions or methods that we believe are the best for them, but we don't socialize that with them, we don't validate that with them, then what happens is that the community might take whatever you give them, resources, economical resources or tools or whatever, and they might, accept that. And then once you disappear, they will sell it or they will give it to somebody else and they won't use it. So it's important that you're always in alignment with that target community, target audience community, and you make sure that you socialize all of this and you propose these ideas to start the conversations, to start socializing, and making sure you validate. Every time that you do whatever behavior change strategy, you need to validate. And of course, learning about the economic incentives that they might have. It's equally important in a phase of socializing that and validating that. To make sure that they can really understand if they like that. And let's say that, for example, they choose community-based tourism enterprises. What does that look that for them? If they need, for example, to learn how to have a proper way to charge money, in websites, or if they need to have like a specific management with uniforms or something. Like, everything has very specific needs that they will need to tell you that they need, where we can support them and where the behavior change strategy will be in charge to support. So these are some ideas and potential solutions, again, that we can start thinking about it. And of course, once we reach that point, is because we are ready to start with the community engagement. And that means that at some moment, we will work with these communities to share the knowledge about whatever elephant behavior. For example, we're going to start training them in coexisting strategies, develop community-led solutions, land use planning, buffer zones, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever you name might be doable, but if they agree with that. So in this case, it's just important to have in mind the people, and that they are rarely acting against wildlife because they dislike nature, but more often because they are responding to in the immediate needs that they might have. So it's important to always have the people at the center and work with them towards achieving conservation and making that sustainable over time. So, of course, with that, I just want to stop and see if you have any questions, comments. And of course, I want to invite you to take the next session that it's about community engagement. And it's going to be on April 8th, same time. And if you want to learn even more and more and more, we have the Behavior Change for Sustainable Impact course, that it's a 6-module course, and it has also how to do theories of change, how to do the research in order to really measure impact, and you can register. And for all of those that do it before April 17, we have a discount. So I hope you take advantage of that. And yes, so today we covered these 3 topics, and I hope you really, really feel that you know and understand the importance of current behavior, desired behavior, and how to mirror those and target audience. So with that, you see, changing behavior is possible. Thank you. And let's see, how many questions or comments do you have?
That was great, Dulce. Thank you so much. I'll hold off on my questions in case more important people have them first. In the meantime, I'm going to put a few more links in the chat. One is just for the Wildlife Wednesday program itself, in case you would like to register for the next presentation. Also is our YouTube playlist. We try and get these posted within a week or so. So please feel free to share those with everybody. And also, in case anyone's interested, as a nonprofit, we're always more than open to any kind of donations to support our programs. So there's a link for that as well.
And I love to see that we have a lot of Spanish speakers here saying gracias. Next one in Spanish.
Guess while we're waiting for a question, I'll ask one. Oh, never mind. Actually, I was gonna work off of something Jessica said earlier, but I'll go ahead and read Jessica's question. Is it more important to have a unanimous acceptance of a change in a behavior from the community or a majority rules kind of agreement?
Well, I will say those are equally important. But when you think about how the community will accept or not accept the change, I will say that they can agree in the first step what they want to do as a change as a community. Let's say that they can really understand the desired behavior, what are the potential solutions towards that. And once they have that, it's going to be the right moment to start working in the rules that they want to have as a community. And if they want to have, for example, co-management in certain type of whatever beehives, let's say, for example, at that moment is when they will be ready to have the same rules and even kind of, have community meetings are certain times a month, having roles and responsibilities among themselves to make sure that they all are included and all the voices are equally heard. So I will say it's super important that they agree first on the desired behavior, the potential solutions, but then in the rules. So it's working properly and all of them can, really move forward with the desired behavior change as a group of people, as a community that is moving into the same direction. I hope that answered your question, Jessica. Thank you for that.
If there is a break here for a moment, Jessica's earlier post mentioned misinformation, and that's something that's very close to home with management issues up here in Alaska, for example, and obviously almost everything political in the world right now. It may be too complex of a question, but how do we counter misinformation, particularly when it's coming from perceived sources of authority or expertise, like researchers, management agencies that may be politically motivated? Uh, Again, that's a really big issue up here, and I'm sure many places. I think with predator control, for example, how can we counter misinformation from perceived sources of expertise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I will say the only way that we avoid assumptions is by doing research. And that can be, of course, in the 2 standardized, worldwide standardized methods that are the qualitative and quantitative research. When we want to have, let's say, baseline to compare at the beginning of an intervention and then at the end, it's important that we do quantitative, so meaning survey questionnaires. So with that, we can have like a really good understanding and data about what is the population thinking and feeling about certain specific behavior, but also the barriers and motivations and all of that. But if we really want to understand their deep, fears, concerns, and the specifics that they will need in order to change. The qualitative research is super important because we can do, for example, in-depth interviews to make sure that we understand how they feel about the change, how they feel about the current behavior, and why they are doing what they are doing. Because it's, like I said, it's not that they don't understand that it's a problem. It's often that they see the problem. It's just that they lack of alternatives to change. So when we understand that by doing qualitative research, in-depth interviews, it's easier for us to develop a strong strategy for them to adopt and to really, I will say, align. But also the focus groups. The focus groups are super important when we are working in communities because that's the only way where you, as the behavior change strategist, can observe the dynamics because that's when you can see if, for example, there's a leader that is the one that speaks first and then the others, follow, or they really say what they think. So it's important to have that observation and have that dynamic reading of the groups to see who is the people that, for example, will help us to move forward, the chain of change whenever we start thinking about it. But also, it's the only way that we can validate everything that we have been hearing, reading, or listening in the radio or newspaper, or the information that other organizations share, because sometimes governments or local organizations, they tend to have the information based on what they need, but not the whole picture of everything and all the spectrum of options and concerns and barriers that the people might have. So it's important that we do our own I would say research to avoid assumptions with those two qualitative and quantitative methods.
That's great. I know at least in America, much of America seems like is the interest and faith in science has been almost made a, a negative. I'm not sure what the right word for that is. It's not exactly promoted to put your faith in science anymore, and that's a massive hurdle, I think, for a lot of us. We feel like we have quality information to share, but it's dismissed because it comes from an academic or potentially just something not aligning with people's priorities or values. But I'll shut up. Anyone else have a question for Dulce? And of course, if people have questions later, they can contact any of us at a CWS. We're more than happy to chat with folks. Any suggestions on talks, courses,
Yeah.
anything.
And in the model, we talk also about research and how to do, for example, proper research in the field with communities. I amplify a little bit of what are the type of questions that they receive normally. I will say good, and how to do it in a condensed way that it's not too big and we don't take a lot of time in the best moments. Ethics of research in conservation. So I will say it's a nice way to also understand that portion of the work.
Any
But
other
yeah,
questions?
seems like it's clear. Yeah.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I hate to shut down too soon. But again, if people have questions, feel free to shout out to any of us. Also, hope to see people at the next uh, presentation in the series. Like Dulce mentioned, it's a month from today, a 4-week month, not a calendar month. And then we have the third part in the series. We'll switch to non-human animal behavior with Stephanie Wilkes in April. Again, feel free to visit our YouTube page for all the recordings in the series so far. We're building up quite the library, which is fantastic. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today. I'm sure everyone enjoyed this. It's a lot to think about, especially when this isn't your normal realm. It's something we all need, I think, a greater understanding of. But yes, thank you again to everyone for tuning in today, and most of all, thank you to Dulce for all this hard work. I know it's a lot of extra on your plate, and certainly look forward to your presentation in a month.
Yeah, thank you everybody, and gracias to those that even share in Spanish. Nice to see you all. Thank you.